Hi, everybody. This is Tom Riddle from Virtual Intelligence Briefing. Thank you for joining us today for another edition of the ViB Success Series, The Art and Science of Virtual Conferences. Today, we're going to learn from a panel of experts, Lisa Dawson, who's a director of events at Ping Identity, Belinda Joseph, who is the senior director of marketing events at X Matters, Robin Trovato, a virtual events consultant and expert, and lastly, backed by popular demand, Mirza Baig, who is a director of digital marketing at Quadient. And today we're going to learn practical advice from virtual conference professionals. Why virtual conferences? What type is best for your organization? How to get started, planning for success, and then tips and techniques that are learned through experience by the events professionals on the panel today. And so with that, let's get started with the first question. Lisa, what are the various types or formats of virtual conferences?
So I think virtual conferences are almost as varied as live events. So you can do anything from just a small roundtable, which you can manage through a Zoom. The larger almost replicates a full live conference, which is the complex full standalone event that's going to have breakouts and keynotes and virtual booth spaces and all that. And then there's also the more of a hybrid event, so where you've got some of your content is going to be presented live, but some of it is being held virtually. And then you have the challenge of how to keep those two intertwined and both audiences engaged in a different format.
Great, thank you for that. And Belinda, how do they differ from physical events?
Yeah, I think, virtual, obviously you kind of miss out on that component of a live event and being able to have that really, one-to-one human interaction with people. But I think the plus side, though, really to virtual event is that, you have the opportunity to really expand your reach, get in touch with a much bigger audience, hopefully bring in more attendees that may not have been able to attend in person. And I think too, with virtual, your possibilities are really endless, right? You can do so many things. There's so much technology out there and people are constantly innovating and bringing about new ideas on how you can really incorporate the things you would have done at a live event and bring it back to a virtual component. And so, there's different ways to really engage your audience, gamification. You can still do videos and chat. So you can still have that, networking and connecting with other attendees. But then you're also just doing it at the convenience, right, of, in your living room and not having to worry about the additional time and expenses that might go into attending an in-person event.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Robin, how valuable is it for a marketer to have some sort of virtual event conference experience? And what did you find about the process that was personally enriching or rewarding for you?
Yeah, so I think that in some cases, a lot of event professionals were focused and experienced in live events. And I think a lot of us found ourselves in a situation where we needed to quickly pivot and go to a virtual event. What I found to be valuable was, in a good takeaway, was really how quick, as event planners, we were able to pivot and make that change into a virtual event. Finding the right partner, that was really enriching because there's a lot out there, and it really opened our eyes to what was available and all the great things that we could do with the virtual event that we could not necessarily do, with the live event, in terms of audience reach, et cetera.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And Mirza, what are the typical goals of a virtual event, a virtual conference?
Yeah, good question, Tom. I mean, number one for a KPI would be just, and I think a lot of, if not all of the attendees on this webinar are marketers or have something to do with marketing one way or another. So definitely the number one KPI should be just how much marketing generated pipeline are you driving through your virtual event? Depending on what marketing automation platform you have, or if you have an instance of Salesforce, Marketo, even if it's something like a HubSpot, depending on your marketing organization, where are these registrants, where are these attendees, where are these no-shows ultimately leading into a funnel? And then within that funnel, is there a sales handoff? So that should definitely be the number one KPI. I mean, why do we do marketing in the first place? It's obviously to generate revenue back to the company. It becomes a matter of attribution, and that's a separate whole side conversation unto itself. But I'd say, what are you giving back to the larger organization in terms of a handoff by holding this event?
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I know, Robin, you've had a set of KPIs that you adhered to for a recent conference that you did. Maybe, is there something you can add to what Mirza has said there?
Yes, absolutely. Very similar KPIs were certainly to drive brand awareness. It was to drive pipeline. Our KPIs for it were also, the number of attendees, and then really watching it through the funnel to see if we could get some closed ones. In my situation, it was a user conference, so that KPI was a little bit more valuable, and really the golden nugget that we were looking for is closed ones.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And Belinda, what have been some of the key drivers for this big upsurge in virtual conferences?
Yeah, I think that, again, at least for X Matters, right, it's really been around awareness for us, in addition to what Mirza was talking about in terms of pipeline generation. So really trying to find a way that's going to best be able to, provide what our attendees are looking for, giving them the content they need, but also still being able to recreate the same experience they would have had if we were to meet in person. So, making sure that we have the right themes in place, making sure that we have the right customers, use cases that are going to be relevant to them, and the challenges that they're seeing in their organizations, making sure that we're addressing those. And really too, because when we decided to pivot our event, again, it was at the beginning of COVID. So we were also trying to tie back to what's reality. And that was really important for us to be able, we're in a great position with our product that really relates back to, the issues that we're seeing right now. And so being able to tie that back in and helping our customers adjust to, the new normal, and being able to apply that to the event and giving them some kind of new ideas and how to adjust.
Great. Thanks for that. And let's talk about COVID for a minute. That seems like a really, really big driver. So Lisa, given the uncertainty of the 2021 COVID outlook, how do you plan your conference strategy?
Yeah, that's something we're actually struggling with right now, because we have an annual event that happens every June. And, what's the landscape look like in June? It could be completely different. It could be, as I hate the term, back to normal. But we have a planning arc. So we have to start now. And we have to start now with the assumption that it's going to look a lot like it does right now, so that we are planning essentially for the worst case scenario, with some gems in our pocket for ways we can expand or ways we can grow and change or morph our event should, the rules become a little bit different for us on the actual, closer to the actual event date. So it is a trick.
Right. Thank you. And Mirza, your company, Quadient, was doing virtual conferences before COVID. How successful were they, do you think? And what was the motivation at that time to do them? My impression is you were an early adopter.
Yeah, we organically took that decision because being a software company, at the end of the day, we have a global footprint where we have offices globally. So for us, it simply came down to quite matter of factly, how can we have the best reach available? You can, by all means, our last user conference, I think, Robin, you were mentioning user conference, or I think it was yourself, Belinda. You can have one in real life. I know, Lisa, you're saying in June, right? Whether it's June this year or June next year, it's like, okay, we can have it in real life. But for us, it was a matter of how can we have the best reach, and how can we have a best attendance and the best outpouring of people to come to the event. And the number one answer kept coming back to us: hold it as a virtual event. You can watch it from the comfort of your couch. You can be running on the treadmill, ear pods in. You can watch it on the train on the way to work. You can watch it at night while you're tucked under the covers. So really, it's up to you as to how you want to attend. And for us, that came back as the number one answer. So we may be ahead of the curve, but it came about to us very, very organically in that sense.
Great, and thanks for that. Now let's pivot to talk about the pivot from physical events to virtual events. And I think everybody has something to say about this. So let's just start in a random order. Robin, how did your company pivot from physical to virtual events?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, we found ourselves in March with that big, huge event that was happening in May, the middle of May, and, had this in the works for over a year for that size of an event. And as COVID was unfolding, having to make some of those really hard decisions like a lot of people had to do, right? And kind of held on, right? Because maybe this was going to change and maybe we weren't going to have to go. And then we had to make those decisions and we had to pivot. So basically in about a week's time, once the stakeholders and teams, basically called it, we, went into full action to pivot to a virtual event. And that meant, getting back together at the table, re-looking at the goals and the objectives of the event, because a virtual event is different than a live event, and kind of reformatting, the whole agenda and how that was going to look like, what that was going to look like. So, that's what we did. And, I was pretty impressed and amazed at how quickly we were able to do it and with a fabulous end result, considering it is not something that my company had, done. We weren't, doing it already like Mirza's team was. We always participated as a sponsor of virtual events, but we never ran those ourselves.
Great. Thanks for that. And Belinda, are virtual conferences just for large companies? How does a smaller company with limited resources pull one off?
Yeah, awesome question. It is not at all just for larger size companies. At X Matters, we're about 200 employees. There's 10 of us on the marketing team. Our events team is very small, mighty team of 2. But, I knew, going into this that I definitely wanted to move forward with an event. Our customer conference is huge for us. We have great customers. They look forward to it every year. So it was a no-brainer for us to transition to digital. We had just under 6 weeks to make that happen. Most of the content was already there. Our agenda was built out. Our speakers were confirmed. So it was really just out about how are we going to, deliver that message in a new way. And so because we are such a small team and, we had to continue moving forward with other business. And so we had to figure out a way to do it that was manageable for our team, but also in a way that was convenient for our customers to be able to consume this information in the way that they wanted and in a way that wasn't going to be too distracting. Because again, this is us adjusting to the new normal of how we were doing things. So what we ended up doing was over a period of 3 months, we broke it up. We had a series of mini events instead of making it, one long week or forcing people to be online for an entire day. We broke it up to make it into consumable bites. So every month we would host, we would have a theme, and based on that theme, we would have a customer share a case study. And then we would also tie in hands-on workshops. So there was some consistency in the messaging. So whatever story you heard about from the customer, we would then go and have a hands-on workshop to show you how you can also achieve that same mission that our customers did. So we would do this, and this would take place maybe over 2 or 3 days, each month. And I think it worked out really great for us. It was very manageable for the team to be able to take their time to work with each customer and workshop. I think the customers really enjoyed it. And we also make sure it was important for us to still keep some of those in-person components to it. So like we had entertainment, we would have opening acts at the beginning of each of our weeks. We brought in a DJ and we brought in a hip hop violinist. And then we also wanted to encourage engagement. So we created a Slack channel dedicated to folks that could go online and still continue the conversation even way after the event was over.
Thanks for that. And let's take a question from our audience. Andrew Amerson asks, many of his clients have been saying the same thing, that virtual conferences for exhibitors are not working. The traditional trade show folks have tried to recreate live events versus conference organizers who have a better sense of what to engage. So what has the panel seen firsthand? Lisa, what would your thoughts be on that? Because it's interesting because you're in a position where your company's attended and participated in conferences, but also hosts a large industry agnostic conference as well.
Absolutely, and it is a challenge because I think, so the first, I think, hurdle or sort of, I'll say mistake, I don't know if it's completely a mistake, but I think the problem is that a lot of people took their live event and tried to recreate it exactly as it was, but only in a virtual way. And that doesn't always translate because, you know, it's just too long of a day. It's too many things packed into one thing. It's when you're doing something virtual, you need it a little bit more bite-sized, but it's a definite challenge from an exhibitor standpoint. And we've been pitched a million different shows for us to come in as a sponsor and exhibit, but it's hard to get that engagement. You know, people say they come to your virtual booth, but it's, you know, it's essentially they've hovered over your space and you might get a notification and you're trying to engage by chat. So it's a definite challenge to show value for sponsors. And I read a report not too long ago that said, you know, most exhibitors are doing like a third of what they used to do, not because the opportunities aren't out there. Everybody who's throwing a virtual event is trying to retain sponsorship money. It's just from a sponsor viewpoint, there's not a lot of value. And where you might get, and I know one of the panelists was saying that they've participated, I think it was Robin, that you've participated in virtual events, you know, you get a good number of leads from that, but the quality is less, right? Because it's literally anyone who comes over and hovers by your booth that you're getting that lead. So I think to get a value for exhibitors, it's the number one thing they're asking for is one-on-one meetings or a way to facilitate those. So if you're looking to go in as an exhibitor or you're trying to sell exhibit space, you want to try and facilitate some sort of matchmaking, some kind of, you know, we're going to get you meetings. That's number one. And thought leadership, like everyone's looking for an opportunity to present their own expertise. So again, if you're trying to sell sponsorships, you want to be able to also provide some kind of a session that they could present. One of the learnings from our last virtual event that we did, and it was a large one that, like Belinda, we had broken up into several pieces over several weeks, is that we had tagged the sponsored sessions as sponsored sessions. And so they actually got lower attendance, but the material they were presenting wasn't sales pitch or anything like that. And I think we did our sponsors a disservice by sort of earmarking them as something different than the main agenda. So there's a lot of different pieces that you can put in place for your exhibitors or that you should be looking for if you've been asked to exhibit at a virtual event. The challenge is not overcome yet. I don't think anyone's hit, you know, the magic bullet on that one yet.
Okay, thanks for that. And Lisa, I've got another question. Let's talk a bit about planning a virtual event. There's a lot around that. So I'd like to actually hear from each of the panelists on that. So let's start with you. What are the building blocks or ingredients or phases in planning and executing a virtual conference? If you look from like left to right, maybe starting with ideation, all the way through to successful conclusion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that you need to look at from almost sort of rethinking what your live event was going to be. I know Belinda mentioned that she had done this in that it can't be a recreation of the live show. So you have to think of it in bite sizes. You have to think of it in interaction and engagement, and how can you get some kind of little reprieve from a long amount of sitting. Most adult learners kind of tune out after about 15 or 20 minutes unless you've popped up a poll or you've taken a question from the audience or something like that. So you need to be mindful of that. The other thing, I think, when you start looking at vendors, when everyone turned to pivot in March, I don't think anyone was ready, but certainly not the vendors. There were like 2 or 3 major players in the virtual event space. And at that time, even when we started looking in March, like an immediate search in March, there was maybe 10 players you could kind of vet and consider as your partner. And now there has to be over 100. Like everyone now can do a virtual event, and they all differ in how they present that information and how they can do that. So choosing your partner, I think, is the next most important piece. And then it's just the other piece I would say be super mindful of is planning for a virtual event. There's more hard deadlines. We've all done live events, and the beauty of that, although we say we're not going to do it and we set these deadlines, we know a speaker can come in the night before their presentation, and having futzed around with their presentation, we can still get it out there. We can still put it on main stage. If you walk in with a brand new USB drive, I can still get you out there. And that's not true of virtual. There is a finite deadline that is literally, you can't give me your presentation any later. And there's a lot of room for technical error. So you have to back up in the how you do your planning, because it just doesn't have the same sort of squishy wiggle room that live events does.
That's an interesting point. That's a very interesting point. And Robin, how about you in terms of planning an event? I know you had mentioned, among other things, is managing the expectations of stakeholders. But I'm also interested, and I think the audience is also interested in understanding, how do you even pitch an idea for an event to your management? So thoughts on that, Robin?
Yeah, so, in full collaboration, right? So for me, it really was almost taking that live event and just dumping it upside down, right? As Lisa mentioned, they're not the same, right? Our event was a 3-day event. The virtual event became a 3-hour event. So it really, it took getting everybody together and having these discussions, and, really kind of looking at what some of the best practices were. And there were a couple of very large conferences that had to pivot even sooner than we did, that we were able to look at them and kind of see what we liked about how they did some things and use that. So it was one of the big things I found early on. Hopefully it's less now, but making sure that the internal team understood the difference between what a webinar was, what a virtual event was, and what a live event was. And I had to do a lot of pulling to get people into the middle, and understand the expectations. As Lisa said, right? It's not, a virtual event isn't a live event, but it's also not a webinar, right? And we're trying to engage our audience a little bit more, but we're also, recognize the fact that it's, a lot of time commit. So for us, the event was a 3-hour, event versus the, 3-day. So, and I also think that for us too, Lisa was, referring to, some of the hard deadlines, COVID added, even from a virtual event perspective, when you're looking at the production piece of it, added a lot more to it, right? Because now you have people at home, your speakers, that you now have to rely on them to utilize whatever technology they have and what the quality was going to be. And being, event professionals, we really wanted to up that ante and make it a little bit better. In a different scenario, we might have sent a camera crew around and, had it done, but we didn't have that ability. So managing that production and the quality part of it was also, something that as a team, we decided that we really wanted it to do that. So it kind of, again, in the middle, right? Not a webinar and not the live event, but have some components of it. And I think it just was really important that the team, the state internal team, had these objectives together from the get-go. And, occasionally they were, needed to be reminded as we went through the process. I hope that answers, the question for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the competition. Nobody creates a virtual conference in a vacuum. So let's say you're hosting your own as opposed to one where you're participating or one where you're running the event. So Mirza, how do you take into account the competition, maybe in when you do it, the timing of it, and other factors as well?
Tom, can you elaborate a little bit more? A competition in the sense of like locking out the competition, or just like a general survey
Yeah.
of what competitors are doing?
Oh yeah. So if you're planning one, I mean, how do you? It's hard to know when your competitor is planning one as well. I don't know if you have intelligence from that, or
Gotcha.
like how do you factor that in?
Yeah, gotcha. I think, we've always taken the approach that, our competitors are going to be our competitors, but we're going to do things that don't even address our competitors. And I think to all the marketers out there, if you take that approach, then just take it boldly and take a leap of faith, because you don't want to be a me too. Nor do you want to kind of be mindful and cognizant of what the competition is doing and then do it in response of. You are not your competitor. You are your own entity. You are your own company. And obviously you have your own strengths. And yes, you have your own weaknesses. So just going with that kind of standard alone will set yourself apart. Now, I'm not saying blindly, do your own event the day of your competitor's event. I wouldn't advocate for that either. But that being said, you don't want to kind of look at their playbook or their marketing kind of strategy and say, oh, they're doing a virtual event, hence we need to do a virtual event as well. Would never say that. What I would recommend is similar to what's already been said by Robin and Belinda. You want to kind of curate and craft your virtual event according to your audience, right? And I think from a slew of questions wrote from the chat and from the Q&A, engagement is really challenging right now, especially in terms of the virtual booths. But I think as marketers, we have to give ourselves a reality check and a head shake. Is that the expectation? Yes, that was the expectation when things were pre-COVID, when COVID wasn't even in our language. Yes, people would actually visit a physical booth. There'd be chit chat. There'd be like, hey, here's a nice shiny, doodad. Here's a little gadget for you. Thanks for dropping by. Let me give you your business card. Hey, enter your business card into a fishbowl. We'll do a raffle for an espresso machine, whatever the case was. We're having a little golf tourney right here on the grounds. Check out our t-shirts and so on and so forth. I mean, it was a great, wonderful playland, right? But within a virtual setting, if we as marketers don't level set expectations, and I think it was Robin mentioning that there was a lot of education, just going on as to what a virtual event is all about. If we as marketers aren't level setting expectations internally with our own executives and saying, hey, you know what, we're doing this virtual event, but the expectations have to be different. The KPIs have to be different. There is sales handoff, there is marketing generated pipeline, but we got to settle with this new norm. And that also means new norm in terms of expectations and metrics and what exactly we're going to get out of it. And if that means less virtual booth engagement or not even having a virtual booth at all, but relying on the fact that you will have attendees, you will have no-shows. Now it's a matter of nurturing those attendees and those no-shows through a nurture program or through your marketing pipeline, then so be it. It may be a harsh answer, but I think we really, really as marketers have to give ourselves a reality check and a strong, strong head shake. I really do.
No, I think that's a great answer. So here's one general, if anybody would like to take this. So one of the draws of a physical event is networking. How do you get that? Is it possible to get any of that out of a virtual event? Anybody on the panel wish to take that question?
Yeah, I can definitely start on that one, Tom. And so, that's absolutely a great question, and it is a big deal, and that's definitely like one of the top 3 reasons our attendees would come to our events, right? It's the networking component. So for us, it was really important to be able to try and figure out how to incorporate that into our Flow Live event. And as I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, what we did was that we created a dedicated Slack group for Flow Live. And we created a channel where they could either ask the experts, so they could communicate directly with our employees from the product side. If they had technical questions, they can directly communicate with us that way. We had a Meet the Speaker channel. So at the end of every customer session, the speaker would hang back in the Slack channel. And so if they weren't able to answer questions live, attendees still had an opportunity to meet with the speaker directly through the Slack channel after the event. And we saw huge engagement with this. People were, spending an extra 15 to 20 minutes after the event ended just to continue a conversation with the speaker or with other attendees. And then in addition to that, we also created additional channels within that Slack just based on certain topics. So whatever was top of mind for them, what was, if they were looking to speak with other peers around those specific topics, they were able to do that. And then in another area that we were still working on, and I think is huge too, if you have this ability, if you have like a community platform, I think having something like that, like a Zendesk or a Jive, or, it's just something that allows you to still continue the conversation. You can post content. And it can live on even long after your event concludes, and it's still an opportunity for your audience to engage with you or to engage with their peers. So yeah, I think there's a number of options out there now. And like, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of technology that's really coming to play to allow you to be able to engage with your group.
Great. Thanks for that. And a follow-on question, Belinda, let's talk for a moment about promoting an event. How do you target and entice people when there's an increasing amount of people doing virtual conferences and other forms of virtual events?
Yeah, we definitely are not shy of throwing out incentives. We do that quite a bit, and it's worked out for us for a number of the virtual events that we've been doing, not just our customer conference. So we've done incentives with gift cards or doing charitable donations. We found a lot of people actually really love that, especially just kind of during this time that we're in, to be able to have a give back component. We're doing an incentive for an event we got coming up where we are offering our customers. We're doing like kind of a multi-prong approach. So we've reached out to a select group of customers and, hey, we have an event coming up. We want you to register, but we also want you to share about the event on your social platforms. And if you do that, we're going to qualify you to win a free pair of Maui Gym sunglasses. And then in order for you to actually, redeem those sunglasses, you have to actually show up for the event. So here we've asked them to do 3 different things. They have 3 call to actions. And in addition to that, we're using them to also help promote our event across social channels. And we've seen good success with that. So, again, we're not above an incentive. I think it works out great. We definitely use our speakers. We create content for our speakers to go and repurpose, and we want them to also share across their channels. Same if we have sponsors and so forth, utilizing our partners to help, create some buzz. But I think, it comes down to, I think you can, obviously the content to help drive that promotion strategy, working with various people externally, but also your teams inside. Not only, email doesn't always work 100%. So I think, there's nothing like a personal outreach. So, working closely with your account reps, with your client success team, they have the relationship. So I always make sure that I align with them and that they're having, when they're on the phones with clients, that they're being informed about an event. So definitely different approaches you can take there.
Thanks. And Lisa, what are your thoughts on how to target and entice people to an event?
It's tricky because now that's pretty much what everyone's getting inundated with. So I would say, check your own habits, right? We're all registering for webinars and different virtual events and that kind of thing, because the majority of them right now are free. I think we'll start to see that change. I think we will start to see people finding a way to provide value and to charge for their events. I just think the initial reaction was, let's go virtual and make it free and open. But kudos to all of you that are actually attending today, but I'm sure there were 3 other things we all signed up for that we didn't attend. So that conversion rate's going to be lower. And to Mizra's point, right, the way you treat that afterwards, how you manage it, once they're registered, then it's a little bit more hand-holding. You got to send out reminders, and we're looking forward to seeing you. And if you're going to run a Slack workspace, like we did that as well, Belinda, you got to get people enabled on that early, like, get signed up now, get in place, get ready to make the most of this experience. You have to tell the audience how to make that a valuable experience. And I think, and then your follow-up makes a difference. You can't follow up on these leads just like you would have at any other lead, because they're slightly more cold. They need more nurturing, and your sales team needs to be aware of that as well.
Thanks for that. And let's just drill down on leads a little bit. We've had, I think, 8 questions in terms of either chat or in Q&A from the audience. Looks like the single most asked question from the audience. How do you generate quality leads? I think Mirza had mentioned, you have that fishbowl, you have people coming by your booth, but how do you generate a quality lead here? And what's the definition of that quality lead? Robin, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's always a tough question, whether it's a live event or a virtual event or, email campaigns, generating quality leads. You're just providing them the content that's valuable to the target audience. And, then just you're taking that lead and, moving it through the pipeline. A little bit different in my scenario because it was a user group. So kind of the quality leads were already there, right? There are current users. We do have some prospects, but the percentage was low. So perhaps another panelist may have a little bit, a better answer for that.
Okay, and we may come back to that. I just want to manage time here correctly. So, one of the things I've heard, in our pre-session and a little bit today was the whole topic of resourcefulness. It seems like resourcefulness is a real key part of success. Does anybody have an example of something that they thought was a really resourceful way to use an asset, to use a presenter, to keep people engaged, something, out of the box sort of a thing. So anybody like to take that in like a minute or less answer?
I guess it was kind of resourceful. I'm not sure. Well, it was successful for what we wanted it to do. We did engage, as you would with any live event, paid entertainers, right? But we took a paid entertainer we actually used Henry Rollins, and we have a IT technical audience. So those guys were hot about it. If you don't know, he's a punk rocker from Black Flag. But we used him to do 4 small segments of interviews of some of our key players. And it wasn't so much that we felt these little infotainment segments were going to be the big draw card for attendance, but they did get us probably our biggest bite on social media. And we did find that driving registration through social was super successful for us on this round, which it had never proven to be for the live event. So I would think that social is going to play a bigger role for you, and look at what kind of ammunition can you feed your social machine to help drive buzz around your event, because that's what we did with Henry Rollins, was just to get it out there that he was doing interviews as part of our segment. We got an awful lot of drive to the website for that.
Great, thanks for that. And now I'd like to ask about platforms, and just keeping time in mind here, I'd like to give each of the panelists 30 seconds just to say what platform they used and maybe one attribute about that platform. Mirza, how about you?
Sure, Tom. So the platform we used is WorkCast, and the real beneficial thing about WorkCast is that it just excels at broadcasting video. And I did mention it before, but it bears mentioning again here. Real quick, you can do what's called a simu-live session. So you can pre-record your video. You can have a very, very professional, polished video, but at the same time, through the platform, you can have a live Q&A chat, and you can also do a live call-in for the Q&A. So the video you're watching is pre-recorded, and while you're doing like an actual live chat, maybe as an end segment, in that sense, it completely feels live.
Great, and thanks for that. And we're going to drill down on some of these topics in another session. Robin, real quick, what platform did your company use?
Yeah, and this was after looking at quite a few on various stages, and we used vFairs. And what I found about them was very user-friendly and very easy for us to use. It really resembled a live event in some components, which is what we wanted to have. The cost was really very, very reasonable. and also provided a lot of great features, multiple rooms, live Q&A, pre-recorded sessions, gamification. So it really was this complete, absolutely wonderful platform.
Great. Thanks for that. And real quickly, Lisa, what platform did you folks choose?
So for our first event out the door, we used Trovato. I'm not sure that it was 100% the good fit, but again, early in the game, there weren't that many players. We're in the middle of planning one with Pro Exhibits, and we have another one in the process with Feed Loop. So happier with those latter two. We've also participated as an exhibitor with people who used like Showpad and On24. So I know there's a lot of vendors out there. You really have to look at what components are most important to you.
Okay. And Belinda, what platform did X Matters use?
Yeah, sorry to say I don't have anything fancy to add to that, but for our needs, it was so minimal. So we were able to pull it off with Zoom, which was perfect for us. And again, we have the small mini event series that we did, and they were just, again, customer sessions. So Zoom worked out really great for us for our needs at that time. We'll definitely explore other options as we move forward into 2021. But I think a couple of things, though, that I did like about Zoom was the Marketo integration. That was very key for us, especially for our demand gen team. So being able to feed that information back and forth between Zoom and Marketo, being able to capture those registrations from both sides as well as the attendees. And then also their live stream integration. So you're able to live stream either on YouTube, or you can even pick a place within your website or anywhere actually and do a customized live stream integration.
Okay,
and
great.
Tom,
Thanks for that.
I would add to that just real quick that regardless of what platform you choose, be mindful about how they're managing data and how they're sharing it. I think all of us are working under GDPR if you're doing global, or even some of the Canadian or California rules. And that became a hot button for our legal and compliance teams, was looking at how people are managing the data and who's capturing that information. So just keep that.
That's a really good point. We're in overtime now, but people have a few extra minutes. Maybe we'll take another question or two here. And so I think one interesting question was pricing. Do you charge attendees for a virtual event? And if so, how would that work? Lisa, I don't know if you want to run with that question.
Yeah, we're looking at our next event to have a price tag with it. It typically has in a live event, and we also need the revenue stream. This one will be hybrid, both live and online. So I think the challenge is giving, and I'm starting to look at this, we're checking other people's events where they're starting to charge. So a lot of the ones that are charging are adding into it some additional or year-round elements, like, you pay for this conference, but it gets you essentially a subscription to the next 5 webinars, or you get 50% off the next live event, or you get something like, there's some value add that makes that price tag look good. But I've seen the prices vary everywhere from like $50 to $1,200. So it's all in how you package up the value. And if you can make that, being able to provide like continuing ed credit, being able to provide access to certain VIPs or conversations, then I think that becomes the key to being able to charge. It's still nascent, right? I'm not seeing a whole lot of people doing it, and the ones that are seem to be all over the board. So we're interested and we're watching.
That'll be something that'll be interesting to follow up. With that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for an excellent session, and would like to thank the attendees as well. And please, by all means, let us know if this webinar has helped you through the process of thinking through doing your first virtual event or a bigger virtual event, or motivated you to do so. Because again, on February 19th next year, we're going to have 4 of our panelists, or I should say 4 of our attendees, present with a panelist And that panelist will be available to mentor you through that process and co-present with you on that as well. So thank you again, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate it.